Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being a part of the online school, and a special thank you to all of the new members who've signed up. It's a great community, and we're really happy to have you here. Today, I thought I'd bring in a special guest. He's an old friend of mine and student. He was at Revere Glass and taught at Revere Glass. So this is Max, and also known as Opera Glass on Instagram, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi everyone, I'm Max. As Dustin said, I've been playing glass for a few years now. Learned at the studio, started taking lessons, babysitting in exchange for studio time back in about 2012.
Babysitting my kids.
Babysitting Dustin's kids, yeah. It was a good gig. So this today I'm making a compression marble that's like super heavily inspired by John Kabuki and the incredible stuff that he does.
For those of you guys that don't know John Kabuki, I'll try to put a link up here for you guys, but he makes incredible compression marbles of the same style, and he's at the top of his game.
Yeah, he's doing the same technique, except he figures out a way to make like a little samurai holding an opal sword. It's just totally nuts, the stuff that this guy can do. So
what colors are you going to use today?
Today we are using, I think, just Star White, Heavy Blue Leprechaun, and I think Grape was the one that we chose to try and give a little bit of a shadowy effect on the petals.
It's ended up cracking. Have you used Heavy Blue Leprechaun in these before?
I have.
Okay,
I have.
So it wasn't that.
I don't think so.
Okay.
That tends to work pretty well for like a dark sparkly color like that. It tends to be pretty stable.
And I think this might be some jade that you're using for the leaves there.
Yeah. I really like jade. It's a pretty color, pretty stable as well.
And that's new. Like I don't know if you remember this when you first started or if this was before you started, but jade used to be synonymous with cracks. Like you couldn't use it for anything. It would just crack everything that you used it for years and years and years. And then they reformulated it. And now like I still have this like, oh, jade, that's scary feeling, but now it's fine. It works everywhere.
That's crazy. I had no idea. I've always trusted it.
Yeah.
Well, here you see me starting to layer the Heavy Blue Leprechaun over a core of white. And I'm just trying to get a thin layer of these darker colors. As I move on to compress them, the stringer will sort of thin and spread itself out in a way that displays the layers subtly. And I think it looks pretty nice.
Yeah, so I think Max is saying that as this thins out, and goes into the flower and gets compressed and inside of the glass, that the color over the white is going to be a really nice veil effect where you're going to be able to see the tints of that color where it's thicker, but as the implosion goes down, it's going to fade into a more white color and give you just a really nice faded veil effect.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. It's sort of like a veil, like sort of just a touch of the darker color. And I choose the Heavy Blue Leprechaun because it has a little bit of a sparkly texture as well. And I just think that's a nice touch.
Yeah, some of these sparkle colors can be a little bit difficult, especially around encasing and things like that. But this one, I guess Max uses it. Max has been doing these for years, and that's why I wanted him to come in and do this demo for you guys, so he would know what colors work in this technique.
Yeah,
sure.
Heavy Blue seems to work pretty well for me. Here you see I'm putting another layer on top of that, and that is the grape, I believe. And that's a very heavily pigmented transparent, and the idea with that was to try and get almost like a sort of an illustrated looking black outline around the petals of the flower.
And you had mentioned that before you hadn't done this second layer, and Max and I were trying to figure this out by, artists that were inspiring us, and we were trying to figure out how they were getting that black outline. So this was really just our first attempt. It ended up actually probably being the way that it's done, but yeah, it's new. And the point that I'm making for you guys is that experiment. Push yourself, push your work. If you don't know how to do something, try it. Even if you don't get that exact thing, you're going to get an interesting thing that you're going to be able to learn from.
Yeah, definitely. That's super good advice. And maybe this piece cracked because I used grape here instead of a color that I was more familiar with.
Grape is super compatible.
Grape is good,
Yeah.
for sure. Something else then.
I think it was the annealing cycle, honestly.
Mhm.
So, like, when we did this demo, I just put it in the kiln and turned it off. I really should have, with a thing like this thick, a marble, I should have at least let it sit in the kiln for 15 minutes before I turned it off, but ideally just run an annealing cycle.
Yeah. Here you see me just, pulling down a stringer, nice fat stringer, trying to keep it pretty even. I want a certain thickness to draw these petals on the face of the compression. Definitely no thicker than like 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters. 2 millimeters would definitely be pushing it. Can't get the detail that you need.
And like, can you go as thin as you want to get as much detail?
Yeah.
A rose with 20 layers or something like that,
Yeah, I would say that you can go pretty thin. It really depends on how comfortable you are with being precise with a really thin stringer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a really beautiful effect if you start with a thinner stringer in the middle at first, and then sort of get larger as the compression goes on, and you add more layers of petals around, as you'll see me do later.
That's really good advice, you guys. Like, I'm not sure. I just want to reiterate that just in case you missed it, but Max is basically saying make the ones closest to the center thinner, and as you move to the outside, a little bit thicker. And this is the same philosophy that applies with certain types of reticellos and other stringer work, is that you pull multiple stringers and you separate them by thickness and use them accordingly. It makes your work, it gives that extra detail that we often talk about putting into your work.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Like, it's almost a detail that you don't even notice the detail at first. It's almost like a subconscious sort of subtlety that the glass just has if you add those little details in when you're making it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, Max. It's like a subconscious subtlety, but when you add all those things together, that piece has an impact. And that's what we're going for as artists and craftspeople. Why don't you talk about the pattern here? And for you guys that are part of the online school, Max is actually going to draw this pattern on a PDF for you guys, and you can just grab that on the forum. I'm going to put it up right next to the video here. So grab that PDF so you have that pattern. But why don't you talk about the pattern that you're laying out?
Yeah, I'm not so usually when I do these petals, I try to follow the Fibonacci sequence, which is, as I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with, like very, very common in nature. Look at the pineapple Fibonacci, pine cone Fibonacci, and other things that aren't pine in the name as well.
So for those of you guys, it's 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 1, 3, 2, 1, 21. So it's the first digit plus the second digit equals the next digit. And so Max is saying that he's going to start with 3, then move to 5, then move to 8.
Exactly. Each layer is sort of adding on to the previous layer. So I'll start with 1, 1 in the middle, and then move on to 2 around that, and then 3, and then 5. And I'm only starting with a couple layers. I think I'm doing the very center of the flower, and then 2 layers, 2 full circles of petals around that. And I'll do a little bit of I'll compress it a little bit before I add a 3rd layer on, and that just creates a little bit more dimension.
What about the pattern itself? What shape are you drawing on the face of that clear?
I'm basically drawing concentric circles of squiggly lines.
Mm-hmm.
You basically draw the line, the width that you want the petal to be, and then through the process of the compression, it'll just stretch itself out into a petal shape. So, you wouldn't want one circular continuous petal going all the way around the flower unless you're, maybe doing something like a daffodil.
A lily
or a lily, like a calla lily. That would be really cool, actually.
Yeah. You guys should try that. Try some different flowers and post them in the forum under this week's lesson. I'd love to see what you guys do with this.
Yeah, that would be fun to see the sort of different like line plans of various flowers, like how you draw that out on a piece of paper and then transfer it onto compression. That'd be super interesting to see.
So what are you doing here? Pulling this off?
I'm just cleaning up the lines. Sometimes you get a little glob of glass at the end of the at the end of the line when you're using a stringer, and I'm just picking that off, making sure it's as clean as I can, everything is nice and even. I don't want, some petals being extra chunky. I want them to be as consistent as I can. And now I'm doing a couple compressions on this one, heating up mostly the outer edge so the glass sort of starts to flow inward on itself, pulling the lines into the center of the mass, and then helping that with the flat surface of a marver.
That's critical, you guys. The way that he's melting it so it pulls it in, and you keep doing that and compressing it, and that's how you get this amazing pattern.
So then you want to stick it back into the flame and start to heat it up around the edges there, and that's really going to suck that into the center. And each time you suck it into the center and press down, you give yourself more and more room for another petal. So you can see it kind of compressing down a little bit, and that's why this is called a compression marble. Flatten it out and put it back in the torch to heat it up again.
And here you see, I've done a couple compressions. The pattern has gotten a little bit smaller as it started to get pulled into the center of the mass. And I'm going in with the same stringer, adding another layer of petals to give the flower a little more dimension. So here I'm just drawing on some, wiggly little lines that I'm going to go in and clean up later. And they don't need to be perfectly round and straight. I feel like if they're slightly irregular, it gives a more natural feel to the flower. It looks a little more realistic here.
You guys can see how in the center it's gotten smaller, which gave Max the room to add on that next layer of petals. So now you're going to compress this and bring it down a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that might be the last layer of petals before I start to really start compressing this. Try and pull it into the center of the mass as much as I can and get that pattern on the outer face as small as I can so that I can terminate the flower and have it looking like a nice flower bud shape before I add the leaves.
And so you're just focusing the heat there on the bottom to melt it in, and now
you're going to just heat up around the edge there, press it down, let everything compress in again, heat it up again, press it in. You're going to do this multiple times to make sure that you can compress this and get the look that you want over the period of time.
Yeah, here we go. This is the last layer of petals.
Are they just dots?
Yeah, I'm adding a couple dots in there just to give a little bit more texture before I go in with the final layer of the leaves. Flattening those down a little bit just so that they're nice and even before I go in with the final round of compressions before I add the leaves.
How many compressions do you think you got up until this point? Like, how many times did you condense that in, press it down?
Oh gosh, probably between 12 and 18 probably.
Already at this point?
At this point already.
So do you do a compression each time that you do one layer?
I do multiple compressions each time I do a layer. I need each layer to go in, to where I want it to be before I have even the space to start thinking about doing the next layer.
Yeah, cool.
Here you see me just struggling a little bit with this termination, but I eventually get it nice and clean, and that point that you see there, sort of pulling all those petals there into a point, really makes it look like a flower.
Now you're just going to clean up the jade there a little bit because you want to be really detailed when you're working down on this level, and especially in these small areas. And now Max is adding the leaves of the under a flower would be some leaves or something, right?
Yeah, and you notice I'm doing a different shape here than I have been previously. And that's because I want the leaves to be sort of pointy and leaf-shaped rather than curved and pretty like the petals have been. So I'm sort of doing a more angular line so that when they compress into the center of the mass, they sort of leave that imprint of pointed leaf shape.
I'm going in here for another compression, heating it up, pushing it down on the marver, flattening it out. That's bringing everything to the center, and then that's going to give you a nice new surface to work on and bring it back together.
Yeah, now that I have the flower in the center of the mass, I need to compress the leaves as well. And I'm doing another little termination on those leaves just to get those into a nice point so that they sort of look like they're cupping a flower bud. And more compressions will sort of pull that whole thing a little bit into the center of the mass.
And now you're just going to grab your marble mold here, and that's going to help you even out the shape and really create that nice sphere that you're looking for. And then from there you can really do whatever you want with a piece like this. You can attach it to your pipe, you can make a pendant, you know, goblet stem, whatever you'd like.
Goblet stem, throw a bail on there, you know, maybe make some very fancy carb cap, who knows. Make really tiny ones, little beads, put them in a nail. I don't know if that worked.
Or some terp pearls, two super tiny terp pearls.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, here I'm just switching punties here. I'm gonna pull off that big chonker of a punty and use the smaller one to help me get a little bit more spin on there as I'm using the edge of the marble mold to make this as round as I possibly can. And that's just, that technique of using a marble mold is something, I'm not sure if I learned that from you, Dustin, but it's something I definitely picked up at the studio.
Yeah, we tended to try to push people initially to not use marble molds because we wanted them to try to just shape spheres with gravity. But of course, when you get into marbles on this level and in your work, then you want to use it. But we wanted to kind of emphasize the gather when we were first teaching beginners, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely a good skill to have, like a you know, a good fundamental knowledge on before you move on to something like this.
Yeah, so rolling it back and forth, kind of at a fast pace actually, just getting that nice and even.
Yeah, I'm spinning it pretty quickly, trying to get some torque on there, just so that I can get a nice consistent smooth sphere before it cools down enough that it won't move anymore.
And then you want to put on, you know, one nice heat here to make sure that there's no marks from the mold or anything like that. We'll go back into the mold maybe one more time so we can show you guys how fast it's spinning.
Yeah, I'm really trying to get the shaping in as quickly as I can before the surface of the glass hardens up, and you know, of course, that's the first thing to you know, cool down is going to be the surface of the glass.
That skin.
So you only have a short frame of time to adjust your marble like that.
And here's the flower I wanted to show you guys. We actually, these are our shots of it, so you can see it turned out really good. You can see the green, you know, that there's from the leprechaun, the little black outline. Everything's encased really nicely.
Yeah, you can see a couple little striations in the petals there, little pokey bits coming through, and that's actually from me going in with a tungsten pick and poking at those lines right after I drew them on the surface of the compression, pushing them into the mass just a little bit to give that sort of impression of a spike or a horn on the petal itself.
Yeah, we'd love to see what you guys post in the forum. We'll put up the video link, of course, and the picture of the finished product. Put your flower compression marbles down there, and Max will be part of it, and you can say what's up to him. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you guys really soon.